Hey folks, welcome back to the channel. My name is Joy, and today I'm going to be talking about the passing of Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, second female justice on the court. Because I've seen way too many black people online and in the news eulogizing this woman like she was the white modern day Harriet Tubman. And we all know that's just not true. According to CNN.com, Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg died on Friday due to complications of metastatic pancreas cancer, the court announced. She was 87. Quote, Ginsburg was appointed in 1993 by President Bill Clinton and in recent years served as the most senior member of the court's liberal wing. At the Supreme Court, she was perhaps best known for the opinion she wrote in United States versus Virginia, a decision that held that the all-male admissions policy at the state-funded Virginia Military Institute was unconstitutional for its ban on women applicants. She said, quote, the constitutional violation in this case is the categorical exclusion of women from an extraordinary educational opportunity afforded men, end quote. Now, of course, in recent years, Ruth Bader Ginsburg has become sort of a feminist icon, especially by the pink pussy hat feminists. She's gotten the meme treatment. She's had this resurgence, which is crazy. That, I don't know there seems to be this pop culture obsession with old ladies who have really done nothing but exist. Like, what's her name? Betty White, Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I don't get it. They've just kind of done their jobs and somehow they've become like these holier than thou. But these most popular memes of RBG, of course, they've fashioned her in the likes of rapper Biggie, Notorious B.I.G. She's garnered the moniker Notorious RBG. Which I'm just like, okay. And of course, if y'all haven't seen the meme, it's like a picture of Ruth Bader Ginsburg in her robes and her lace thing. I think it's called like a jollet. I don't know. And she has on the Biggie crown tilted to the side. You know, the famous one he took before he passed away. Now, of course, Biggie grew up in the streets. New York. I was reading his biography. He was out dealing when he was 12 and had dropped out of high school by 17. And still, despite all of that, all of the racist policy that led to that being his life, he still made something of himself. As opposed to Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who grew up with every opportunity she wanted right there in front of her on a silver platter. But I digress. I just can't understand how, other than, again, white folks' obsession with appropriating black culture, did Ruth Bader Ginsburg earn the moniker of Notorious RBG. Where most of these white folks who call her that probably couldn't even name a Biggie song, let alone pick him out of a lineup. Put him next to Fat Joe and Big Pun. They wouldn't know which one was Biggie. Come on now. Despite all this, no record of Ruth Bader Ginsburg doing anything for black people. So we got Derek Johnson, president and CEO of the NAACP, who issued the following statement on the passing of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, saying, quote, the NAACP family is devastated by the passing tonight of Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Justice Ginsburg was an incredibly accomplished civil rights lawyer who devoted her entire legal career to the pursuit of equal justice and eliminating discrimination of all types. When President Bill Clinton nominated her to the Supreme Court, he called her the Thurgood Marshall of gender equality law. So damn, they've been calling this, they've been repurposing RBG in the image of black men since she's been on the Supreme Court, Bill Clinton, quote unquote, our first black president, called her the Thurgood Marshall of gender equality law. Okay. Now, we saw she's known for this United States versus Virginia bill. I mean, I haven't even gotten to the crux of the video yet. I haven't even gotten to it yet. Bill Clinton calling her the Thurgood Marshall of gender equality law. And the NAACP painting her, again, as the second coming of Harriet. And I'm trying to figure out. It's all good and well what RBG did for gender rights. But if we have the NAACP, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, I'm trying to figure out, what has she actually done throughout her time on the Supreme Court for colored people to have garnered such high praise from the NAACP and to have garnered being likened to Black American, African American, ADOS icons like Thurgood Marshall and Biggie. Well, let's start from the beginning. Ginsburg assumed the bench in August 1993 after being nominated by former President Bill Clinton. According to reporter Ed Whelan, who was a Senate staffer at the time of Ginsburg's nomination, as part of her confirmation submissions, Ginsburg sent in a form that revealed that over the course of her 13 years on the D.C. Circuit, she had never had a single black law clerk, intern, or secretary. Out of 57 employees, 0 were black. Whelan continues, when Senator Orrin Hatch later pointed this out, during her confirmation hearings, Ginsburg responded, "I'm going to try harder, and if you confirm me for this job, my attractiveness to black candidates is going to improve." Says, as if the problem had been that black candidates weren't sufficiently interested in clerking for her on the DC circuit. So when confronted about how she could have had 0 black employees out of the 57 in her office, and yet be compared to the incomparable Thurgood Marshall, Ginsburg says, I'll make the job more attractive so that black people will want to work here. Whelan continues, quote, "If Ginsburg had carried through on her promise to try harder to hire black law clerks, there is barely any evidence in the results. Over her 27 years as a justice," we're speaking today, of course, "Ginsburg has hired only 1 black clerk among the more than 100 clerks she has had." End quote. The Thurgood Marshall of gender equality. The notorious RBG. And out of what am I counting now? At least 157 employees, 1 was black. And before she became a Supreme Court justice. So literally in the last job of her career, she manages to hire a lone black person. Now, whether they're African American ADOS is any wonder. I wouldn't bet a lot on it. I wouldn't bet my life on it. I wouldn't bet anybody I care's life on it. I wouldn't bet no type of money on it. Seeing what we see today. Now, after her confirmation to the bench, Professor of Law at Duke University, Jerome McChrystal Culp Jr., wrote in an open letter to Ginsburg. This was at the time of her, when she was first put on the bench. And this guy, he's professor of law at Duke University. And he writes to urge her to do more for African American civil rights than her predecessor, Sandra Day O'Connor, who was the first woman on the Supreme Court. So Culp writes, quote, this is going to be a long quote, so bear with me here. The issue I raise about the current court and Justice O'Connor is about adopting a position that leaves the concerns of Black people and other racial minorities without any effective outlet. The court has said, in essence, that Black people cannot complain about the racial status quo, and that law and governmental policy will not be a part of a response to racial concerns. I do not, of course, require an oppression essentialism. By oppression essentialism, I mean a requirement that because you have suffered gender oppression, you must always reach some particular result in gender or race discrimination cases of you or of Justice O'Connor. Indeed, the central point I want to make in this letter is that oppression and subordination are both the same and different across culture, race, gender, and sexual orientation. So stop the quote there. He's saying basically, this is the beginnings of what we now talk about as intersectionality. That just because you are a woman does not mean you understand what it means to be a Black woman, or even a Black man for that matter, or a minority in any sense. He goes on to say, quote, like you, Justice O'Connor is married to an influential member of the bar. With respect to class and race, both of you have come from the privileged end of our society. Privilege does not mean that the holder cannot hear the voices of the oppressed, but it does suggest that one possessing such privilege ought to take care to examine where she is in relation to others and where she and others are going. Racial and gender oppression are both different and the same. This duality means that understanding or even partially understanding of one form of oppression does not mean that one will or can understand the other. Such understanding is required if racial justice and equality are to be achieved in the near future. End quote. So much like we understand in seeing how affirmative action policies have been implemented, modern day affirmative action policies, I'll say that with respect to the legislation that JFK enacted that says, where we get the name affirmative action again, that employers will take affirmative action to assure that employees and those that we want to hire are not discriminated against on the basis of race, gender, so forth and so on, religion, nation, creed. As far as we understand that affirmative action, he is saying that folks like Justice O'Connor, who serve as, in many ways, the one lone voice of women on the bench, or have been placed into these seats to be the diversity hire, does not mean that they understand every diverse person, every minority. That just because you are a woman, again, does not mean that you understand the life of a Black woman or a Black man. Culp Jr. goes on to say that, quote, Justice O'Connor refuses to allow the former capital of the Confederacy to attempt to alter racial status quo. There are essentially no Black contractors employed. Former capital of the Confederacy. Is it wanting to hire Black people? Goes on to say, she suggests that any problems created by a lack of Black contractors can be solved by racially neutral proposals, but ignores the extent to which such racial neutrality cannot provide a real alternative to racial change. In Shaw versus Reno, however, Justice O'Connor goes further and clearly demonstrates the extent to which she is committed to a restricted and oppressive racial present. She permits white plaintiffs to claim a constitutional harm when no Black plaintiff could do so. She is joined by Justice Scalia and Chief Justice Rehnquist, who have argued elsewhere that when raised by groups other than white Americans, such harms cannot be a violation of equal protection, end quote. Well, doesn't that sound familiar? It sounds familiar to me. That we have Culp here, legal scholar, professor of law, arguing that Justice O'Connor has said that race-based hiring policies, meaning these contractors, a place, the former capital of the Confederacy, that has had basically zero Black contractors, can fix this issue with race-neutral policies. Race neutral meaning we affirm to hire with no regard to race, ethnicity, creed, religion. Race neutral. Race is not a factor. Like I said, does that not sound familiar? That Justice O'Connor many years ago affirmed the right of employers to institute race-neutral policy and argued against any such legislation or precedents that would pay special attention to race as a factor. You may remember in March 2020, the Supreme Court handed a win to Comcast in its long-running racial discrimination suit that was brought by Byron Allen, black billionaire. Of course, in a unanimous, now this is March 2020, in a unanimous decision, which included Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the court agreed with Comcast in upholding a high bar for bringing suits under the 1866 Civil Rights Act. The justices sent this case back to the Ninth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals, which had earlier ruled that Allen need only reach an easier to meet discrimination standard to consider the matter once again. So to break it down here, the legal question was whether Allen would have to prove that Comcast would have carried his channels but for his race. Again, if Allen was white, Comcast is saying that that's what he has to prove, that if he was white, the channels would have got carried. Comcast argued in favor of this strict but-for standard, while Allen said that he should be allowed to sue even if race was only one of the factors, or what's known as a motivating factor. Now, Justice Ginsburg, again, agreed with Comcast, agreed with the unanimous decision, the conservative-leaning court, arguing that Byron Allen had to meet the nearly impossible standard of proving that race was the only factor. Let me just break this down to you, because it's even hard for me to this but-for standard. Now, if Comcast executives went to Byron Allen's corporate headquarters and they said, you know what, Byron Allen, we love your proposal. I'm glad you sent it. And everything went great. And the Comcast executive said, you know, this guy is great. They went back to but you know, we got this other guy, my nephew, and you know, Byron Allen, he's really does that urban stuff, and it's, you know, kind of not our thing, and he's saying everything, but we're not doing business with him because this man is black. The Comcast executives can then type up some bullshit letter that says, well, we went to the guy's headquarters and, you know, I was trying to log on to his Wi-Fi with my cell phone and it was really slow, so we didn't do the deal. That's the bullshit reason that Comcast can now use to say, well, Byron Allen said it had something to do with race, but not really. Look at this. So if it was a white guy who had slow Wi-Fi, we wouldn't have taken his contract either. Well, we all know that's a lie. You can come up with these bullshit reasons to deny black people contracts because of this but-for standard. And Ruth Bader Ginsburg agreed with it. This is this year. This was at the end of her life, when you're supposed to be the wisest, right? By the time RBG died, Ginsburg had suffered from more than 5 bouts of cancer. 2 of those bouts of cancer were in 1999 and 2009. She got a stent implant then. And then most recently, she had another scare in early 2020. Now, if you think about the math there, you'll see that at least for 10 of those years that Ginsburg has been sick, there's been a Democratic president. Of course, Bill Clinton for the 2 early years of her sickness, you know. And then Obama for the last, you know, that 8 years, that 8-year chunk that he was president. During those times, she had multiple bouts of cancer. Now, I think if you can work, yes, work. But we both know that she was out many times. We all know she was out many times while Barack was president. So one has to really wonder, why didn't Ruth retire when we could have guaranteed a Supreme Court justice to replace her who was nominated by Democratic President Obama? Why didn't she retire if this was so important for her, for somebody to fill her position who aligned with her beliefs? Why didn't she retire when she should have and could have? Well, folks, it's because most people know the reason. And most would agree that RBG wanted to hold out for a President Hillary Clinton, who is all know is a white feminist icon like herself. Why have a black President Obama appoint a replacement for you when you can have a white feminist Hillary Clinton? And the crazy part about that is when Obama did nominate justices, he nominated Kagan, a woman, a white woman, Sotomayor, a Latinx woman who is white passing, and Merrick Garland, a white man. So really, what was RBG even worried about? She should have taken her chances. And now there are rumors that Trump was going to pick a black woman to replace her. No chance in hell. But this is what we got. And now the last letter is, you know, I want a new president installed before I'm replaced. Well, you know, and I'm not going to give her no credit. According to News One, RBG did heavily dissent in 2003 when the Supreme Court struck down a key component of the Voting Rights Act, the historic law that in 1965 abolished restrictions on Black Americans voting in federal, state, and local elections. So fair is fair. She voted in favor of voting rights. But, folks, 2013. What liberal judge in America is voting against, making judgments against voting rights? I said the same thing with Kamala. It's like her coming out for paying incarcerated workers a fair wage. Well, yeah, it's 2020. Why didn't you have that opinion 10 years ago when you had the power to do something about it? Because you didn't think it wasn't popular. So now when the right thing is popular, you want to do it? So yeah, Ruth Bader Ginsburg made decisions in favor of voting rights. The least a person could do. Basic human rights, remember? And then, what most people don't know is even Ruth Bader Ginsburg cases and legal decisions that she's celebrated for in regards to feminism and women's rights, those were largely influenced and co-opted from an ADOS woman. So I wonder how much how much more of her legal opinions are not originally her own. According to The Nation, Polly Murray, a brilliant black female lawyer whose law review article arguing that the Equal Protection Clause in the 14th Amendment applies to women was later used by Ginsburg. An orphan who taught herself to read at age 5, Murray was the first African American to receive a JD from Yale Law School and laid some of the theoretical legal groundwork for both the women's rights and civil rights movements. She helped Betty Friedan found the National Organization for Women, socialized with Langston Hughes, Eleanor Roosevelt, and James Baldwin, and later became a poet and Episcopal priest. Unlike Ginsburg, she actually was an activist, starting as a child when she refused to ride segregated streetcars and later was arrested for sitting in front of the bus. But no movies or mugs bear her visage, and she is very far from being a household name. The article continues, to her great credit, Ginsburg herself insisted on naming both Murray and another feminist lawyer, Dorothy Kenyon, in one of her landmark briefs to acknowledge their work was built on theirs. To acknowledge that her work was built on theirs. But in the movie, On the Basis of Sex, about Ruth Bader Ginsburg's life, Murray's role is reduced to a moot court cameo, while Kenyon, played by Kathy Bates, is a recurring presence and portrayed as the only predecessor for Ginsburg's legal theory, including a made-up interaction that never happened in real life. Wow. How many of y'all have ever heard of Polly Murray before now? And damn, this movie depicted, of course I didn't watch this shit, so I don't know what happened in it, but this movie totally erased Polly Murray, who Ginsburg herself admits in one legal case was the precedence for her legal theory. They completely erase Polly Murray and instead make up interactions between Ginsburg and a white character. Again, how many of y'all have heard of Polly Murray before now? How many times have you seen Polly Murray's picture alongside Ruth Bader Ginsburg's when we hear about how much of a champion Ginsburg was for women's rights? How many of y'all know what she looks like? I'm just asking the questions. We also know that Ruth Bader Ginsburg harshly criticized Colin Kaepernick for refusing to stand for the national anthem prior to the kickoff of the football games that he was playing in, along with other athletes who followed in his footsteps, and we're still seeing that protest today. During an interview with Yahoo News' Katie Couric, Ginsburg, back in 2018, so not that long ago, again, at what is supposed to be the end of her illustrious career, Ginsburg shared her feelings about the football players' silent protests. Quote, "I think it's really dumb of them," she said. When asked to elaborate, she added, "Would I arrest them for doing it? No. I think it's dumb and disrespectful. I would have the same answer if you asked me about flag burning. I think it's a terrible thing to do, but I wouldn't lock up a person for doing it. I would point out how ridiculous it seems to me to do such an act. If they want to be stupid, there is no law that should be preventive. If they want to be arrogant, there's no law that prevents them from that. What I would do is strongly take issue with the point of view that they are expressing when they do that." End quote. Okay. Colin Kaepernick responded back, "It's disappointing to hear a Supreme Court justice call a protest against injustices and oppression stupid, dumb, in reference to players doing that. I was reading an article and it refers to white critique of black protests and how they try to delegitimize it by calling it idiotic, dumb, stupid, things of that nature, so they can sidestep the real issue. As I was reading, I saw more and more of the truth, how this has been approached by people in power, and white people in power in particular." Now, wow, as Ginsburg puts it, we have this dumb player, Colin Kaepernick, laying it out in black and white exactly what Ginsburg is attempting to do here. Delegitimize the real issues. Of course, folks who want to dismiss it prematurely, make it about the national anthem or the flag. Just like those folks who Donald Trump would say are good people on both sides, Ginsburg delegitimizes what Colin Kaepernick is trying to say about police brutality, calling it idiotic, dumb, and stupid. Funny enough, found this little ditty here. Says in 2018, Ginsburg expressed her support. Same year. Just about. Ginsburg expressed her support for the Me Too movement, which encourages women to speak up about their experiences with sexual harassment. She told an audience, quote, "It's about time. For so long, women were silent, thinking there was nothing you could do about it. But now the law is on the side of women, or men, or who encounter harassment, and that's a good thing," end quote. Of course it's a good thing. Perverts need to be held accountable for their actions. There's no doubt about that. I don't care where you work, man, woman, child, perpetrating it against. Nothing wrong with that. But why couldn't notorious RBG have that same support for Black Lives Matter? Why did she call Colin Kaepernick in a legitimate 400-year-long protest of brutality, white supremacy, racist policy, ADOS being cemented as a bottom caste in this country that we built? Why is that dumb and stupid? Why is it different? How is it different? Is it different? And yet we have the NAACP celebrating her passing as if she was some crusader for the rights of Black anything. ADOS people especially. Or really any people who weren't just like her, i.e. white college-educated women. I applaud her efforts, being a military academy graduate, being from West Point. VMI, they just copy us. But anyhow, that's not the point. I applaud her efforts to get women into VMI. But opening up more opportunities for more white women to go to more colleges wasn't exactly taboo in 2006. Saying that a state-funded school shouldn't bar a whole 50% of the population from attending isn't putting your career out on a limb. Wake up, folks. We have to learn not to paint broad strokes across history and make RBG out to be something she has never been. Ruth Bader Ginsburg did exactly what she was supposed to do when she was nominated for the Supreme Court. She provided Clinton, Bill. She provided a cover for Bill Clinton, who, with his many sex scandals, has always had a piss poor record on gender-based rights. So who other than someone whose sole focus is gender to appoint to the Supreme Court? What her appointment did was also ensure that the Supreme Court wouldn't seat someone who would do something just for Black people, as evidenced by Ruth Bader Ginsburg's entire legal career. She couldn't even be bothered to hire Black people, let alone create precedents that might help all Black people in America, ADOS specifically. She did the same thing that Clarence Thomas did for Bush. She provided cover and then got on the Supreme Court and didn't do nothing. But that's not exactly true. Ginsburg did make sure she expanded the power and the privilege of white women in America. But she didn't do nothing for expanding the rights of African Americans. which is ironic considering her whole career, both the work she appropriated from Pauli Murray and the affirmative action seat she sat in were built off the backs of AWS. These same African Americans who she couldn't be bothered to do anything for. That's what's funny, if there's anything funny about the situation. Another Rachel Dolezal, Jess LaBombera, CV Vitoli. She just did it all in her own skin. But let me know what you think, folks. Leave a comment, like and subscribe to the channel. And I'll talk to you next time. Bye.